Hey guys, just giving you a few hints about your Milestone 2 that is due at the end of week 5 this week. And I've said it a whole bunch before, but you know me, I like to say things over and over and over again. The idea of this milestone is that you're going to submit it. I'm obviously keeping the rubric in mind, and I'm going to give you feedback. Then you're going to be able to make any additions and improvements so that you can include Milestone 2 in your final project. So just like Milestone 1, the better your submission is now, the less work you'll have to do in week 7 when we're turning in that final project. So let's go down here and take a look at the Milestone 2 guidelines and rubric. So the big difference between this milestone and the journal and the work comparison and the Milestone 1 that you've done thus far is that now Milestone 2 is narrowing it down a little bit. So remember that in your previous submissions, you chose a track, whether it's humanities or communication, for example, and then you compared the 3 different jobs that were in this track. Well, as you can see here from the beginning of the guidelines here, Roman numeral number 1, select an employment opportunity. So you're now narrowing it down from those 3 jobs that were in that track, and you're picking one of them. So you're picking one of those specific jobs. You're not just making up your own job. You're using one of those 3. And then from there, you're creating a budget and all of that in the subsequent pieces of the assignment, which, of course, I'm going to discuss now. So the first part, Roman numeral number 1, is pretty straightforward. It just says select an employment opportunity. So very straightforward. You're going to tell me out of those 3 jobs, which job did you decide to choose? Okay. Roman numeral number 2, living expenses and debt. This is where I get some people who get a little bit confused. So I'm going to go through this with you. It says using your selected employment opportunity. So again, using the job that you chose out of those 3 jobs. Analyze your monthly expenses and income and prepare a plan for paying down your debt. Now, maybe you've gotten there and you're saying, oh, maybe you're one of those lucky people who's not like me and you don't have any debt. This is a math class, we're still doing calculations, and frankly, even if you're not in any debt right now, trying to plan a budget with debt in mind is really a nice way to kind of open your eyes and be like, oh, snap, I definitely don't want to end up in debt anytime soon, because this makes it a little bit harder. So it is still a learning experience at the same time. So regardless of what your situation is, you are going to prepare a plan for paying down debt. So it tells you that you can use your actual amounts of expenses and debt. Okay, so first of all, you can use your real, not life numbers if that's what you feel comfortable doing. However, I understand you might not be comfortable with me being in all your business and knowing your exact figures. If you are uncomfortable with using real numbers, or if you do not have any debt, so if you're in that situation where you don't have any debt or you just don't want me to know about it, you can make up, okay? So you can actually make up your own debts to include for the purposes of this activity, okay? You can just make them up. But if you read the rubric, it asks you for, the wording says key components? You go down there just to make sure. Key characteristics is what it says in the rubric, okay? So the fact that it's asking you for key characteristics, you got to make sure you include those characteristics. And those are given to you here in the prompt. Those key characteristics are a principal amount, an interest rate, a payoff period, and a minimum payment. So you need those 4 pieces of information. So whether you're talking about your own debt or whether you're making it up, you need those 4 pieces of information about those debts. And it tells you what kind of debt you need to include in here. You need at least 1 student loan. You need 1 credit card. And you need 1 personal or auto loan. So it's very specific about the 3 pieces of information or the 3 debts that you need. And then it says you can utilize as many loans as you like, but you must have at least 3. So if you're like me, and the 2 pieces of debt I have in real life, I've got a mortgage and I've got student loans. I'm perfectly comfortable with writing about my real numbers to my professor. So I've got 2 pieces of real life debt that I'm going to include in my budget, but then I'm going to have to make up one. So in this case, maybe I decide I want to make up, because I've already got a mortgage and I've got the student loan covered. So personal loan for our purposes here could be a mortgage. Okay. So I've got those 2. So maybe I'm just going to like make up a credit card. All right. But I got to make up an extra one because I need 3. Please make sure you are putting 3 pieces of debt in there. I've had people in the past who have said, well, in real life, I don't have any debts. So then they just don't include it. Well, then you are not going to be getting all of your points on this milestone 2. And then, of course, subsequently, if you don't add it again, you won't be getting all your points in your final project. So please make sure that you do that. The other thing I want to make sure that you notice, and I'm going to scroll down to the rubric for this. So the rubric asks you, so I believe I've covered this debt comparison. Okay, so it says key characteristics of at least 3 loans. Okay, we covered that. But now let's look at this category above it, budget creation. Creates a monthly budget using the new income. So again, I can't give you all of your credit if you didn't actually use the income from the job offer letter. Real life expense categories. Okay, so if you create yourself a budget and you don't leave yourself some room for food, okay, you're leaving out a pretty darn big real life expense. So that means you're probably going to end up, instead of being in the 100% area of the rubric where we want to be, you're going to be over here under needs improvement, is missing key expense categories. Okay, well, missing food, that's a pretty darn big expense category that you're missing. So make sure that the general categories that a typical person would have in their budget, that they're all included. So that's one place that people sometimes have a tendency to miss some points. And here's the other thing. It specifically says in the rubric, expenses associated with travel to the new work opportunity. Okay, so you specifically need to put travel in there. If you are going to commute, I need some expenses figured into your budget that are going to say, does it include gas? Does it include a transit ticket? What are the expenses associated with travel to the new work opportunity? Or you could say, say you've decided to relocate. What were the expenses associated with that? So as long as you've got some expenses associated with travel in some way, shape, or form to that new work opportunity, that's okay. But there's got to be something in there associated with travel. The other thing I want to point out, and I'm actually going to go back up to the prompt for this, is underneath debt where it says number 2 and number 3, process and plan. So the process here, determine how you will figure out how to pay off your debt. Okay? So I want you to really realize what that's saying. Determine how you're going to figure it out. So I'm going to give you a little bit of, so that's not telling you over the course of 10 months, I am going to put this much money away to go towards this debt, or that's not your actual plan. Okay? Your plan is where you say, this is how much I'm going to put towards this. This is how long it's going to take. This is how many payments I'm going to make. That's your plan. The process for how are you going to come up with that plan is what they mean by process. I'll give you a little bit of a clue. There were several planning strategies that were discussed in the first module of this course. I personally am kind of partial to the ideal, but there were other strategies that were there as well. Make sure that you get the difference. So 2 is saying, how are you going to come up with a plan? 3 is saying, what is that plan? So those are 2 different things. And as you can see in the rubric, there's a place for each of them. So it's two different pieces of what that assignment is asking for. The other thing I wanted to point out is that in here there is, just like Milestone 1, there is a link to a Milestone 2 template. It's really entirely up to you. If you would rather just answer these questions in a Word document, you can. My preference, just like Milestone 1, is that you download and answer the questions here in this template, because it just makes it a lot easier for me. Frankly, it's quicker when I can see exactly what question you're meaning to answer at that particular moment in time. Makes it easier for you too, because you're less likely to skip steps because the problems and the questions are laid right out there for you. I hope this helps to answer some critical questions about this assignment. And as always, if you need any extra assistance, don't hesitate to reach out.